watching Goal Line Extended, presented by Lacrosse Flash.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Goal Line Extended. Today is Thursday, March 25th, and my name is Ryan Hossack. Thank you all for joining us here for our second episode of Goal Line Extended, a brand new show out of the Lacrosse Flash podcast network. Today, we've got a big show lined up. Austin Owens will be joining me in a moment as we preview the 2021 PLL entry draft, set to go down tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Twitter Spaces. On Tuesday, Pat Gregoire and I talked about the Cannons, Atlas, and Water Dogs, what they might do with their first-round picks, picking first and sixth, third, and fourth, respectively. Today, Austin and I will look at the Archers pick at number 2, the Chrome at 5, and the Whipsnakes at 7, and what the Chaos might do with the 8th selection to close out the first round. We'll also be taking a look at the mock draft that our Lacrosse Flash team put together and giving some of our thoughts on what we think about that. And then a little later, Liam Kelly will be joining me, Lacrosse Flash PLL and college lacrosse writer. We'll be discussing some of the big college lacrosse games set to go down this weekend, headlined by number 4 Syracuse taking on number 2 Duke tonight, Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can catch it on the ACC network. We also have an ACC battle between Virginia and Notre Dame on Saturday. TD Erlin will be making his debut for Denver against Providence, and number 5 Rutgers will be hosting number 3 Maryland in a rematch of Maryland's win a few weeks ago. And to close out today's show, Whipsnakes face-off specialist Joe Nardello will be joining me, hence the Whipsnakes jersey. It was a Christmas present to myself. We'll be talking the upcoming PLL season, the 2020 PLL Championship Series, and then Rutgers and Maryland, which is set for this Sunday. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify and Anchor, and hopefully soon on many more podcast platforms. And you can follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at GL Extended. All of the links, as well as the Lacrosse Flash website and social media, will be down below in the description as well. Austin Owens, welcome to Goal Line Extended. As I said on Tuesday, Austin and I have been putting in some serious hours to get this show put together and ready. We'll be putting in a few tonight to get this thing ready for upload. But for the next 20 minutes, Austin, we get to talk some lacrosse. So let's get right to it. On Tuesday, Pat and I talked about the Cannons. He said that there's absolutely no chance that even with Lyle Thompson not yet signed to the PLL entry draft player pool, as according to the PLL website as of Wednesday afternoon, there's no chance that he won't be the first overall pick to the Cannons. That is a lock that he will be. He also likes Ben Randall as possibly the second poll taken to the Atlas at number 3, possibly the first. And Canadian midfielder Challen Rogers to the Water Dogs with the 5th overall pick, a pick that I know you like as well there for Coach Copeland and the Water Dogs. One team that we didn't talk about and that we will talk about today is the Archers. Head coach Chris Bates holds the 2nd overall pick in this draft, essentially able to pick whoever he deems as the best player available behind Lyle Thompson. He has a few different directions that he can go in. He recently acquired attackman Connor Fields from Chaos. He sent midfielder Ian McKay over to the Chaos in that trade. Comments by Bates after that trade makes it seem like Fields will be used in a variety of different ways, as an attackman, as a midfielder out of the box. So it seems like the likely route will probably be a defenseman, or as I'm possibly thinking too, slim possibility, a face-off man in the form of Max Adler with the 2nd pick of this draft. But Austin, I know you and Tino Farah, who made the Archer selection in our Flash mock draft, you guys like defenseman Graham Hossack. How do you think he'll fit into this Archers defense that did just lose a key piece in Curtis Corley to expansion?
Thank you for having me on, Ryan, first of all. And as I said to you guys after I saw this recording, I did not agree to this tire pumping that you gave me the other day. That was more than kind. I really appreciate it. When you look at this draft, I mean, Pat said it perfectly. There's one guy with a bullet that you put on this board, and it's Lyle Thompson. I'm going to put a second guy in there, and Tino did a great job with our mock, and it's Graham Hossack. And if you don't know anything about Graham Hossack, or you don't know his resume in the field game, that's understandable. I think he went to Lindenwood University or college. I can't remember the school off the top of my head. Sort of a smaller school, but he is an absolute monster. If you watch him in the indoor game, the indoor league, quote unquote, the NLL for everybody else, his play with the Halifax Thunderbirds and the Rochester Nighthawks has been nothing short of unbelievable. They call him the cyborg up there, and he's an absolute machine, man. He's just a big body. He literally, I don't know if you've seen the clip, he has literally picked up a grown man and thrown him to the ground like he's a child, and then went and scored a goal in transition a couple of years ago with the Nighthawks. He's just unbelievable, and he keeps getting better. That's the scary part. He's still young. He's still able to do everything possible under the sun, but he keeps getting better as a defender, which is the scariest part. I think he could play LSM if you really need him to. He could play, he's a nightmare short stick defensive midfielder if you need to. and he's a close defender. And I think I know Pat talked about Latrell Harris the other day and being a guy that you could really plug into different spots. You could put him on an attackman and he will beat the crap out of that guy. You could put him on a midfielder and he could stick with him as well. And most midfielders, he's going to body up and really make it a hard time. I was watching a video the other day and Rob Pennell was talking about, I believe it was the 4 guys in the MLL that made it the most difficult for him to score goals. And Graham Hossack was the last one he mentioned. He only played against him for 1 game, maybe, or 2 games in the MLL. That shows what just a nightmare he is to go up against. 3-time NLL Defensive Player of the Year. There's nothing more I can say about him. And Chris Bates talked about needing to get bigger and stronger on the defensive end as a close defender. I don't think you get a better option than Graham Hossack. I think he stands about 6'3", maybe close to 220, 230. Like, he is the guy. And, when we started doing our mock, he wasn't on the board quite away. We had to completely start the mock over again because he was that good. We had to start from pick 2 because Lyle's obviously a lock.
Completely from scratch because the fact that we said right away, and as Tino his rightful selection took Graham Hossack there at the second overall pick for the Archers. I like this. Reading Coach Bates's comments about wanting to get bigger, wanting to get stronger. I'm thinking you put Graham Hossack down low with Matt McMahon, who had led the league in caused turnovers in the 2020 PLL Championship Series, with Eli Gobrecht, who's gone from D3 stud to now covering the best players in the league every single game. You put those 3 together with Scott Ratliff at LSM. You already have Dominique Alexander to run as a short stick defensive midfielder. You have just brought in Connor Fields. That's the thing. It's like the Archers had a few needs. Possibly you could say they could have added another offensive player, but they just added Connor Fields. So now it's like, all right, what do we need to do? Yep. I'm thinking possibly face off, but I think a possible move that they could make in the college draft, possibly to go after TD Earl, and that's a conversation for another day. But the possibility does exist here that Max Adler is available because he won't be taken first overall. He is available, and a possibility there to take it second overall. But as I probably agree with you and Tino and most people that might be making predictions on this, I like Graham Hossack there at 2 with Eli Gobrecht and Matt McMahon and Scott Ratliff on this defense. That sounds scary. You think the Whip Snakes defense is scary. I think Graham Hossack adds a different element to this Archers defense that they probably need to these teams are all going to get better. So
he's a different kind of monster, man. You put him with Eli and you put him with McMahon, I believe was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate last year, McMahon. And you have Scott Ratliff, who's arguably, if not the best LSM in the league. That's a core to build with. And then you lose Curtis Corley. It is what it is. But then you also have guys like Mike Simon. You've got Jack Rapine. Like, Chris Bates is set up for success with this. I'm of the belief that you build from the back out. He's got a good goalie tandem still in Drew Adams and Adam Gittleman, excuse me, English Austin. And yeah, that D-core is unbelievable. And you talked about it. You have Dom Alexander, you've got Moose, Mark McNeil. You're laughing if you're the Archers and you're able to get Hossack at 2.
Definitely like the Archers taking Hossack at 2. Let's move on to the Chrome. They select 5th overall and also have the ability to go in a few different directions. In our Flash mock draft, Liam, who will be joining me very soon, he selected short stick defensive midfielder Zach Goodrich, the 2020 MLO Defensive Player of the Year, transition threat, incredible athlete. Austin, what does a guy like Goodrich bring to a Chrome team that just lost LSM Reese Eddy, who I spoke to on Tuesday, and midfielder Sam Duggan in expansion, 2 guys that were really important to their 2020 turnaround from the year before? What does a guy like Goodrich bring to this Chrome team?
Defensive stability is the main thing. And I mean, it speaks to how good he is as a player that he was almost named the MLL Defensive Player of the Year as a short stick defensive midfielder. Ridiculous that sounds just off the top. But Zach Goodrich, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of him, truth be told. I've watched tape of him at Towson. He's an absolute monster. He's got that, 6'2", 200-pound frame. He fills out. He can just absolutely body up guys at the top. He's got the speed and length to stick with anyone he wants to. And I think Liam said it perfectly in our mock. He's like having a 4th or 5th LSM or pole out there. He's just going to dominate. When you look at Chrome, how they're laid out right now, Tim Sudan, another team that I think is really well off. You lose Reese Eddy and you lose Jake Pulver in the expansion draft, but you have Joel White who's coming back. You've gone and got Jesse Bernhardt last year in the draft. You've got Mike Manley, who was your top close defender last year. You're set back there. And then you've also got Donnie Moss, who kind of a quiet championship series last year, but you've also got Haas. You've got some other midfielders. And then looking at it, I mean, that two-way midfield game, John Rannigan, absolute monster. Jordan Mcintosh, I will say it time and time again. I love Jordan Mcintosh, and he's probably one of the most underrated players in our sport. And then you got Ned Crotty, who had a huge championship series last year. So I think, again, building from the back out, Goodrich just does so much for this team, and he's going to make them better as a result of just him being so stable and being able to D up anyone. I think I've seen him go at guys from X as well as a short stick, which is just ridiculous.
Also, in terms of our mock draft, Randy Stotts, Dan Bucaro, they're still available. Just two of the names that I could absolutely see head coach Tim Student wanting to plug into his offense. We've heard comments from Student saying that he wants to try to find his next goalie, the heir apparent to John Galloway. We'll talk about the Chaos a little later and what they might do. But what do we think the chances are that Student comes out and takes a goalie here at 5?
Ooh, you see it. We didn't think about it until just a couple days ago when Sudan came out and said that
When he made those
was,
comments, yeah.
Yep. I don't think we were even looking at it because I mean, you look at last year, John Galloway was fine. I mean, the Chrome, when you look at it, their defense was good. They had good CTO numbers. They had good ground ball numbers, but they just bled goals, and that was their biggest downfall, I think, in the end. And it's not John Galloway's fault. I think it's just a combination of things, sort of the quality of chances as well. The one game that sticks out to me is when Chrome jumped out to that huge lead on the Water Dogs during group play. And then the Water Dogs ended up coming back on them and tying it, sending it to overtime. I think I don't know what it is, but John Galloway is one of the best in the world still. Questionable style choices with the track pants during the middle of the summer, but we won't get into that. But yeah, I mean, when Tim Sudan said he was looking for the goalie of the future, that really perked up a lot of people's ears because John Galloway he's not taken a dip at all. I don't think, at least from what I've seen the last 2 years, I think he's been very good. But obviously you lose a guy or you let a guy go in Brett Queener, who was a very steady backup for you, I think. And you need to add that next guy. And John Galloway's, I think, probably close to 35. So it's definitely time to start thinking about it and getting that next guy in. Maybe it's in the entry draft. There's certainly a lot of goalies you could go after, whether it's Nick Morocco, Sean Scanone, Brian Phipps comes to mind as another guy that could be a veteran ad. I know we had him in the mock. Or you could go with a guy like Drake Porter in the college draft. I think that might be a good way to go. It really depends on who's available, I think. And that's sort of all these teams. They've said, we've looked at X number of guys, but at the end of the day, you don't really know what the other team's going to do, especially with all the talent on this board. Like we've gone back and forth, you know, as well as anyone, Ryan, that we've gone back and forth and said, well, this guy should be here. This guy should be up here. It's different levels. Like we've gone and debated. I think in our 2 mock drafts, we had a couple guys that were taken in like the second round that ended up going top 5 in the next draft when we redid it.
Our first draft, Randy Stotts somehow slipped to the middle of the second round.
Our first draft, Pat Gregoire was I can't speak today. Pat Gregoire, he's going to get on me for that. Was laughing all the way to the bank. He took him at 12, I'm pretty sure, with the Water Dogs.
In our first one, yeah. Second one, he didn't make it.
He was calling them the Wagon Dogs, and fairly so. He had Challen Rogers and Randy Stotts off the top, and then we said, no. We're going to have to redo this. That's unfair. Yeah. In reality, it was because of Grant Hossack. But still, yeah, Randy Stotts is unbelievable.
Speaking of the goalie situation, too, I'm looking at the college draft because the Chrome hold the 3rd overall pick. The Chaos are down at 6, with the Archers at 5 ahead of them and the Redwoods ahead of them at 4. All 3 of those teams, Redwoods, Archers, Chaos, I look at as being in the face-off market and being in the TD Erlin sweepstakes. So if I am Chrome, I am holding on to that number 3 pick, especially looking at Chaos and looking at Dylan Ward saying, hey, if you want TD Erlin, here's the 3rd overall pick. And Dylan Ward will probably, I'd imagine, be somewhere involved in that trade with, I'd imagine, a lot more because I think there's Dylan Ward draws enough as it is in terms of trade value.
Oh, yeah.
Add that number 6 pick in there as well. Definitely could be a nice package for Tim Sudan and the Chrome. The Whipsnakes, 2-time defending PLL champions, they select 7th overall, were able to keep their main group together during expansion. And really, they didn't lose much in that draft. Max Tuttle and backup goalie Jake Stover, they were the only ones taken by the Cannons. So really looking at these 2 drafts in the offseason as a chance to build some depth and find some quality players to plug in with your already existing core. For our Flash mock draft, as I said, this was my selection. I'm going with short stick defensive midfielder Isaiah Davis-Allen. Really the only need, I think, for this team being short stick defense after the loss of Tuttle, the retirement of Ty Warner. We saw a few other retirements amongst midfielders, Joe Locasio, really strip this team of depth. But during this waiver period in the 2 drafts, expect Coach Stagnita and his staff to fill out the rest of this roster. But Austin, do you approve of my selection of Davis Allen at 7? There's a few attackmen available, some other polls. What are your thoughts on this pick?
I'm going to say right here on Goal Line Extended for the entire world to hear, Ryan, I really enjoyed that pick. I'm not going to make any.
There we go. That's what I like to hear.
If you're the Whip Snakes, I mean, you just lost Ty Warner, and good luck to Ty Warner, by the way, in his medical career.
Oh, yeah. I talked to Reese Eddy. I didn't bring it up in the interview, but Reese Eddy was a med student.
Yep.
And when I got him on the call originally, I was just kind of talking to him like back and forth. And
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that anymore.
No.
I'm not doing it anymore. So props, not to put Reese on the spot, but props to Ty Warner for keeping going through with med school.
There's a reason only a certain number of people make it as
I
medical school students. It takes, I'm not saying anything about Reese. I'm saying it takes a certain kind of dedication that not all people really want to go through. And I don't blame them because it is a grind to try and go through that. But Ty Warner's gone back-to-back PLL champion. And when you look at it, I mean, what do the Whip Snakes need? They're stacked at attack. Brad Smith was a revelation. I don't know, revelation might not be a keyword, because I think he was somebody they really liked to start with. He just didn't have a spot in their 2019 squad. But he was
injuries
fantastic.
too. Injuries his senior year at Duke played him into that first season.
Yeah, absolutely. Zed was Zed. Rambo was Rambo. Jay Carlson was a fantastic option when he got into the soft spots of the defense. You only lost Max Tuttle in the entry, or in the expansion draft, excuse me. So when you look at it, the only glaring need you already have one of the best defenses in the league, and you have Kyle Bernlohr, who's a fantastic goaltender. You don't need anything. You're adding depth, honestly. And that's all the funny thing about the Whip Snakes is they just kind of protected guys that didn't exactly play for them, but they just had extra spots because they had such a small roster and they only had their key guys they needed to keep. So TJ Camizio was a guy that came to mind. I thought he was going to be exposed, not because he's a bad player, but because they had Ty Warner. It turns out Ty retires, essentially, walks away for his medical career. Now you have TJ, and now you go out and get a guy like Isaiah Davis Allen, who's other than Goodrich, I'd say is the quintessential short stick defensive midfielder that you want to have in this draft if you're looking for that position. He's a standout at Maryland his entire career. He was a stud with the Bayhawks during the MLL bubble last year. He's the perfect guy to just plug and play into the system. And when you put him with, I don't know, who am I thinking of here? Jake Bernhardt. It's a pretty good duo.
Oh, yeah. Sounds like a pretty good duo to me.
Yeah.
And the final pick of this first round belongs to the Chaos. Now, in last year's entry draft, Towers surprised a lot of people by going with goalie Dylan Ward. He's still on that roster. We talked just a moment ago about the chances that he might get traded. But sitting here at 8, no face-off man currently on the roster. What are Coach Towers' options here with the 8th overall pick?
If I'm Andy Towers, I am taking the first person I see off the board that has a Canadian flag next to their name. And yeah, that'll be it. In all seriousness, Andy Towers, the thing that he needs, it's like Canada's team. It's like I'm talking for him. What the Chaos need is a face-off specialist, first of all. Losing Tommy Kelly, regardless of what it says stats-wise last season, is a huge loss for them. Obviously, they left him exposed for the Cannons, and they ran that risk, and it bit him. I think you have Austin Henningsen still. He's unproven in the PLL. Obviously, he was just sort of picked up as a backup option. But when you look at it, I think that's first and foremost what they need to get. I mean, from what we've heard, I don't think Alex Woodall is going to be playing this summer. So the immediate one is Max Adler that you really look to. And he was a standout for the Denver Outlaws last year. I think he's your guy that you want to sort of plug in there. And I think he's a guy that you really look at as a number one and sort of a guy that you can trust. You don't really have to run a face-off combo if you don't want to. I know Chaos ran it a bit, maybe. The Water Dogs are really the team that sort of got away with it. The Water Dogs and the Archers with Kelly Fowler and then Simoneau and Withers. But most of the time, it's most of the PLL teams just going with one guy, and I think Adler can be that guy. But if you're looking at other positions, I mean, they just lost Deemer Class, which was an under-the-radar loss at the midfield position. They lose Connor Fields, obviously, to a trade. You could add another attackman if you want to. I like Chase Fraser. They brought him in from the player pool, but honestly haven't seen him play field lacrosse yet. So hell of a box player, but I don't know what he's going to be in the field game until we see him out on the field. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Miles Thompson, because depending on the status of his brother, which we still don't know at the time of filming, I would assume that Miles would end up with Lyle at some point, but who knows? I don't think attacks really. I think you can address that in the waiver wire. I think uh, losing at the defense is a bad thing for the Chaos. Sorry, I'm had a brain fart there for a sec. Um, I think your defense, I don't know, Dan Coates and Jason Noble are very good. They're very good box players. They were sort of quiet in the championship series, which is good if you're a defenseman, but I didn't really notice them at any point sort of locking guys down, but they're steady pieces. But Pat talked about it. The guy I want to see on Chaos is Latrell Harris, and I would absolutely love to see him there. If not, maybe a Warren Jeffrey. I think he's a guy that is an absolute game changer physically. I think he'll just destroy some people on slides, and he's going to be a guy that PLL fans really like. But face off first, and then I think you either add to the midfield, maybe short stick defense or your close defense. I think those are sort of the main ideas for Archer's Chaos right now.
Speaking of Warren Jeffrey, in our Flash mock draft, Pat, who is selecting for the Water Dogs, he selected Warren Jeffrey. So just some context there to the conversation. But definitely Latrell Harris being an option there. I'm thinking, as me and Pat were talking about on Tuesday, probably a post-draft ad by a team. And then if you're the Cannons, I mean, you essentially have – it's a 24-pick draft. You essentially have pick 25, 26. I don't know if the PLL doesn't put a cap on how many players that Coach Quirk can add. I mean, the possibilities seem endless for Coach Quirk.
Who would you go with the 6th overall pick? Because the Cannons have 2 first-round picks.
If Randy Stotts is available, I'm taking Randy Stotts to pair with Lyle Thompson. I would make the same argument, I think, for Dan Bucaro. If Zach Goodrich slips to 6, Zach Goodrich, I think, is a lock. And I would say I wouldn't take a shot on goalie yet.
No, that's
I wouldn't take a bite at the goalie position yet, just because I think there's a lot of time. There's a lot of options in college. We're talking about Dylan Ward. Dylan Ward as a possibility to get traded somewhere. So I think goalie situation, you don't worry about it, but you focus on those guys, those top talented guys that are probably going to be available. One of them will be. So
I might have a hot take here, but I think if you're the Cannons, you take Randy Stotts to pair with Lyle Thompson. And in my head, I was thinking about it today when I was getting ready to hop on, is like, wouldn't it be a fun little thing if they went and got Randy Stotts, Lyle Thompson, and then on the waiver wire, you go and get Shane Jackson and you just add that Georgia Swarm trio? That would be maximum chaos. And even if you get the first 2 and you don't get Shane Jackson, I don't know if it's a hot take, but I think you have Lyle and Randy are so special together. And I've gotten to watch them for a number of years on Georgia with the NLL. They have such good chemistry. It's like, it might be up there with the best duo alongside your Jordan Wolfs and your Justin Gutterdings, your Zed and your Rambo. I think they're up there with the elite duos if you can get them in the expansion or entry. Getting my drafts mixed up today. It's been a long day, Ryan.
Absolutely. We also heard on Wednesday the PLO's Joe Keating. He's been Keegan. My apologies. I'm gonna start that over actually. We also heard on Wednesday the PLO's Joe Keegan. He has been interviewing the PLO head coaches, and during his interview with Redwoods head coach Nat St. Laurent, the only team we haven't talked about leading up to this draft, as he does not have a first-round pick. St. Laurent mentioned the thought to try to move up into the first round of this entry draft. He currently holds the 11th overall pick. Austin, first, how much do you think it will cost for the Redwoods to move up? And then who do you think St. Laurent might be targeting with that possible pick if he was to move up?
That is a good question, sir. I think Nat St. Laurent, when he was talking to Joe, made the point that at their, I think it's 11th overall pick, they have about 4 guys that they've sort of looked at that they're interested and think might slip to them, which is a benefit to them. In terms of what you might have to give up to get a pick, to move up a couple picks, like I don't think 11th overall is that bad with all the talent in this. You're still going to get a starting caliber player, but there might be, say, a Bucaro slips or maybe a Bryce Wasserman. I know you already have a strong attack unit. You don't really need an attackman, but maybe you use them as a combo midfielder, sort of how the Archers use, or not the Archers, well, the Archers and the Water Dogs use Christian Cuccinello the last couple of years. I don't know if you really want to pay the price to move up a couple picks because it's going to cost you draft capital in the college draft.
And the Redwoods don't have, it doesn't seem like that much draft capital. They just acquired Rob Pannell. Mm-hmm. They acquired Miles Jones last year, and I think that traded pick carries over into this draft, if I'm not mistaken. I
Yes.
might be wrong there.
They have the
It
fourth
doesn't. It
overall
just
pick in
doesn't
the college.
seem. It doesn't seem like the Redwoods have that much draft capital. I mean, obviously they have the player talent, but do you want to part ways with that player talent? That comes the question.
The interesting thing to me with the Redwoods is I don't know why. I don't think it would. It's tough because maybe you do something where you pick up another second round pick and you have two guys in close proximity to each other, where you go from like the 9 to 10 pick and get another guy where you can sort of double up on talent in that second round. Because they have the fourth overall pick in the college draft. I don't think you trade that in order to land a first round pick in the entry draft because of the amount of talent you have. And when I look at the board, the fourth overall, TD Ierlan's going to be there. I mean, Atlas, they don't need a face-off guy. Water Dogs don't need a face-off guy, as far as I know. I'm a little skewed because I'm a big Jake Withers guy, and Chrome certainly doesn't need a face-off guy. They have Connor Farrell. So when you look at it, like, are you willing to give up TD Ierlan to get a marginal upgrade somewhere else? That's sort of what Nat St. Laurent has to sort of wrestle with, I think, going into this draft.
The question also becomes too, if the Archers or Chaos try to jump the Redwoods in that college draft, would the Redwoods might have to again if St. Laurent wants TD Ierlan, might have to jump then again too if the Water Dogs aren't the ones that trade that pick originally. We will see. That is a lot that will be kind of unfolding in the next couple of weeks. For everyone watching and or listening, you can find the full mock draft at lacrosseflash.com. The story will be linked in the description as well. Looking at this full mock, Austin, which selection pops off the page at you as a perfect fit for both team and player that we haven't talked about yet?
Oh, God. We haven't talked about it today, but Challen Rogers seems like the perfect fit for me. I'll just throw that one out there I'll give Pat a little pat on the back. Warren Jeffrey is another one. 13th pick in the draft to me. Chrome, Liam took another beauty in Brian Cole, and I think he's somebody that's criminally
I'd an eye on Brian Cole.
Criminally underrated this year, I think. Especially what Liam talked about in the mock is just the shorter field and how it's going to benefit a lot of these Canadian guys. And Brian Cole was a standout at Maryland as well. He's a great midfielder. He was talked about as an MVP candidate in 2019, and he was fantastic for the Boston Cannons in 2020. So when you look at it, I think Brian Cole with the guys we already talked about, Crotty, Ranigan, and Mcintosh running the midfield there, even if it's a two-way, because I think Brian Cole plays transition in the indoor game. So when you look at it, he's a perfect two-way midfielder that you can put. And you could even run, say, if you want to do a Goodrich, John Ranigan, Jordan McIntosh, or Brian Cole running back on defense, like that's incredible if you're Chrome, because then you just have to move it up to your front unit, and you've got probably the best midfield in the game, I would say.
I'm looking right now at Liam's selection for Chrome at 21. He took Sean Scannone out of the UNIT, NCAA D1 goalie of the year in 2019, the 2019 and 2020 MLL goalie of the year. We were talking about Tim Sudan wanting to find his heir apparent, his next goalie behind John Galloway, who is the head coach at Jacksonville. We have no idea what his future entails or what his plan is for the future, but obviously we're hearing Sudan say, "Oh, we're thinking goalie." That makes sense here as we're looking at Scannone going possibly 21st to the Chrome. We also have some coaching news to discuss. Atlas defensive coordinator Rick Beardsley yesterday stepped down as the team's assistant coach, citing differences with head coach Ben Rubier as the reason for his resign. Austin, this isn't exactly what Atlas fans want to hear right now. Their team is in the middle of a rebuild, or as we've been liking to say, a retool. This defense wasn't great last year, which is maybe a good thing, but I guess we'll see. Any thoughts on who Coach Rubier might tap to fill this role?
That's a weird bit of news to come out on, what was it, a Tuesday?
The Tuesday before the entry draft.
2 days before the entry draft. And
we hear Coach Stagnita on Twitter Spaces with Joe is talking about, oh, yeah, I got I forget the name of his assistant coach that is doing all of his watching all the film, watching all the tape on all these guys. Coach Stagnita saying, that's not my job. That's not my thing.
Yeah.
But it's like day before the entry draft and like this happens. Like was not expecting this.
Yeah, it's sort of came out of left field. And I mean, I'm sort of interested that Beardsley was so open in saying, I stepped down because Rubio and I didn't agree on the philosophy of where this team needs to go with the rebuild. And when you look at it, I mean, Atlas, for all that they've done to sort of blow up their front end, the back end still looks okay. You got Tucker Durkin, who's one of the best in the world. He just missed a little bit of time due to COVID. Cade Van Raphorst was fantastic. You've got a couple guys in Pafani and Chick who are also good. I mean, you got a good base there. You just have to find replacements for Kyle Hartzell and Callum Robinson at that point. But I mean, when you look at it, it's just very odd because you sort of think that Atlas is going to go skew towards offensive players in these drafts. I know Beardsley probably wants to add another big defensive guy. I'm sure he was sort of campaigning for Ben Randall to be with that third overall pick. Maybe this is a sign that the Archers, oh my God, the Atlas, I am having a bad day, Ryan. It happens to the best of us. The Atlas want to go with Ben Randall, but maybe they go Dan Buccaro. Maybe this is sort of a sign that Ben Rubior wants to sort of skew offensive in these first couple drafts. We know he's going to take Michael Sowers first overall. But maybe he sort of tipped his hand with what Beardsley said that they want to go with the offensive side of the ball. And when you talk about a replacement, I think Dan Orestia brought up a really good point today, and Ken Clawson being a guy to look at. Rubior, I think, would be really smart to bring in Clawson. I mean, his resume as a defender and a player in the MLL speaks for itself, but he's also just a very smart mind. Obviously, his time at the University of Virginia, he was one of the best defenders in the world. I think he's the perfect guy to sort of fit in, and he's still sort of around the age of some of these veterans. So his voice isn't going to get lost in the room. That's what I kind of like about it. He's going to be a guy that's been in there with the players and knows what they're going through, and he can sort of relate to them a little better. I'm not saying Beardsley couldn't, but I like the Clawson idea because I think he's been through it in the pro ranks, and he's probably play alongside and against some of these guys as well. So he's going to be a guy that the players really like.
We will see what Rubior decides to do there to fill that defensive coordinator role, but Clawson absolutely a good option. All right, that's going to wrap up our PLL entry draft discussion for today. As I said before, the PLL entry draft goes down tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Twitter Spaces. Make sure you don't miss it, and follow Lacrosse Flash on Instagram and Twitter for all the latest news and updates as the draft is moving along. Austin, thank you for stopping by. We will be back momentarily with Liam Kelly to talk some college lacrosse. Do not go anywhere.